Okay, so this is a continuation of the first video about rotating patterns. We were in the middle of doing Dorian, and Dorian again is taken from a minor pentatonic. So we're going to find the A here, play a minor pentatonic. That means play two wides, then three narrows, and then two wides. And wherever we have wides, we're going to add the note right next to the pinky. So, and then wherever we have narrows, on those first two narrow strings, we're going to add one fret below the pointer finger. Nothing on the third narrow. And then back to wides, again, next to the pinky, you add a note. So it's symmetric that way. In all these scales, you're going to see that whatever you do next to the pinky and the wides, you're going to do the same thing next to the pointer and the narrows. So again, here's our wides. Right next to the pinky, we add a note right next to the pinky. So right next to the pointer finger on those first two narrows, we do the same thing, one fret away. Now you can play it like this, and you can slide, or you can just refinger it and do this. That gives you an A minor pentatonic, or A minor Dorian, built straight from the minor pentatonic. So all the things that you're used to doing with a pentatonic scale, you can still do. You just have some added notes. Just gives you some more color tones that you can't do, and some more potential motives, because now you have three notes on a string, where before you only had two notes to work with. So you have some more colors and some more moves. You can also kind of choose to mix scales. If you want a bluesier sound there, we can do that blues note. There I was doing some of the blues notes. And there's a Dorian note. Here's a Dorian note, and here's the blues note. You get some really colorful sounds just by mixing the scales. But really all I'm doing is thinking about playing a minor pentatonic scale and adding a couple notes to it. Okay, so that was a Dorian scale. And you can do that wherever you want. If you put your pointer finger on an A again, remember to get minor pentatonic, you play two wides, then three narrows, and so on. So here's our pointer finger. Put your two wides. And remember what we did to make a Dorian scale was right next to the pinky, we added that note with the ring finger. Here's our next wide, shift down on the third string. Same thing there. Now we have the narrows. Shift back up for the narrows, and then we do the same added notes. Right next to the pointer finger and the narrows, we add the same notes that we added to the pinky and the wides. So here's our wides, add these. Here's our narrows, add these. And they are the same notes. You never really do anything on that third narrow when you're doing these other modes. Okay, and that works everywhere. Pointer finger up here, here's our two wides, three narrows, so we can go, and so on. Up here. And that's true whether we find it with the pointer finger or the ring finger. If I find my ring finger here, let me see if I did the right thing there. Here's the ring finger. Yes, I got that wrong. Here's the ring finger. My little cloud of narrows around it, so I go. And then here's my wides, so I add the ring finger. Here's my narrows. So on those top two narrows, I add a note. One fret below the pointer. Here's my last narrow, and here's my two wides. So I can go. Now I'm back to the narrows. I can add that note there. And if I'm doing these little 3-note per string runs, I always have that sort of odd string that only has two notes on it. Usually I add a chromatic there so I can keep three notes. So here's my narrows. If I add the notes for Dorian, then I have this odd one little string that has 2 notes, and I go back to 3 notes in the wides, and then 3 notes in that added narrow. So on that little odd string, I'll usually just add a chromatic in there, so I get something like this to make something usable when I'm playing. The chromatic always works. Musically, basically you're adding a blues note there. And over a blues, that sounds fantastic. You stay with all your normal pentatonic licks, all your chord licks, and just add other notes. That's the sound of Dorian. You can also play that over minor chord progressions. Okay, so that was a Dorian scale. Here's a major scale on A, major pentatonic. So again, put pinky on A. One of the Mixolydian, or the Mixolydian scale is one of the major modes, and that's kind of the opposite of the Dorian. What you do is you find your wides, and instead of doing the note right next to the pinky, you do the note 2 frets below the pinky. So here's our wides. So if I add my middle finger there, I get a Dorian scale. And so for the wides, we went 2 frets from the pinky. So in the narrows, we're also going to go 2 frets below the pointer. That ends up being an open string here, open string here, and then we're back to wides. So we go to the middle finger. So again, whatever is done to the pinky and the wides, we kind of mirror that with the pointer finger in the narrows. So 2 frets below the pinky here. That means 2 frets below the pointer finger here. And nothing on that third narrow. Now we're back to wides, 2 frets below the pinky. That gives us a Mixolydian scale. And then here again, because I only have 2 notes, I might just put a little blues note in there. Chromatic. Just so I have 3 notes on that string. Cool. That's a Mixolydian scale with one little added note on that string that doesn't have any added notes. So I can do the same thing here. If I want to play my major pentatonic, I put my pointer finger on it, get 3 narrows, do the shift there, get 2 wides, do the shift there. So again, here's the pentatonic. That's A major pentatonic. If I want to play Mixolydian, remember we did 2 frets below the pinky in the wide, so we're going to do 2 frets below the pointer finger in the narrows. Nothing on the string. Then here's my pinkies again, my wide, so I'm going to middle finger it. Then add the middle finger, add that little 2 frets away from the pinky note. And then go back up to the narrows, and I can add that same 2 frets below the pointer finger. So here's my narrows, third narrow, here's my wides with the middle finger added, and then here's my narrows again with the added note 2 frets below. And again, I'm going to kind of fill in that little chromatic area. And then here's the wides, and back to the narrows. That was the Mixolydian scale with that little added note. So I get 3 notes on every string. And you can do this with tapping. Oops. That also sounds great over blues. That's a Mixolydian scale. And we can do that anywhere. Again, put your pinky on an A. Here's our 2 wides. To get my pentatonic, 2 wides, 3 narrows, with a little shift on the 3rd string and a little shift back up when the narrows are stacked on top there. So here's my wides. Add the note 2 frets from the pinky, middle finger. And then same thing, 2 frets below the pointer finger and the narrows. Cool. And we can do that anywhere. Put your pointer finger there. So I get my narrows, wides. Here's my wides. So I have 2 frets below the pinky, add a note. And then we have our narrows, 2 frets below the pointer, 2 frets below the pointer. And then we have wide again. So here's my narrows. And then my wides. And then so on. Okay, so that's Mixolydian scale. Basically, wherever you have your 2 wides, you do 2 frets below your pinky. And then same thing, wherever you have your narrows, you go 2 frets below your pointer finger on those first 2 strings. So major is kind of a mix of those 2 added note patterns. So I want to play a C major. Here's my C. Play a major pentatonic. You put pinky on the C, 2 wides, 3 narrows, and then back to 2 wides, and so on. And what we're going to do for this one is sort of mix it. Remember, Dorian, we added the note right next to the pinky on both those wides, and then right next to the pointer finger. That was Dorian. And for major, what we're going to do is on the 2 wides, you're going to add, for the first one, you're going to add it right next to the pinky, and for the next string, you're going to add it 2 frets away. So it's kind of a mix of what we're doing in Dorian and Mixolydian. So here's my wides. I'm on a C major. So C major pentatonic, 2 wides, 3 narrows, and 2 wides. Right next to the first one, my ring finger. Right next to the next wide, middle finger, 2 frets away from the pinky. And then when we get down to the narrows, we do the exact same thing. We kind of mirror that. On the first pointer, we go 1 fret. On the next narrow, we go 2 frets. And that 3rd narrow doesn't change. Then we get back to the wides. On the first wide, we go right next to the pinky. So look at it again. Here's the pinky. Here's the wides. On the first one, we do your ring finger. On the next one, do your middle finger. So 1 fret for the pinky, 2 frets from the pinky. And then down here, 1 fret from the pointer finger and 2 frets from the pointer. So we have cool. So major is a little bit more difficult to play because you're doing a mix within the wides and the narrows. So here's my wides, ring, then middle, and then so one fret, then 2 frets, in the narrows, 1 fret, then 2 frets, nothing on the 3rd one, then back to the wides, 1 fret, and if we had more strings, the next one would be 2 frets on a wide. So I can do that anywhere. I can find my C here, for example, 5 frets up, here's my 2 wides, 3 narrows, so I add a ring on the first one, middle on the next one, then I add 1 fret here, 2 frets here, and we get a major scale. And you do that anywhere, however you find pentatonic. Remember, you can put your pointer finger on this to get a major pentatonic, 3 narrows, 2 wides, and 3 narrows again. So here's my narrows, 1 fret below, 2 frets below, nothing on this one, 1 fret below the wide, 2 frets below the wide, and then back to 1 fret below the wide. So we get a whole scale there. Major scale built just from the narrows and wides of the pentatonic. You can build every single one of these scales every scale that you're ever going to need, every scale in common use, just by seeing the pentatonic wides and narrows. For some of the scales like harmonic minors, you actually have to change one of the notes. Like for example, a harmonic minor scale in A. Here's our A minor pentatonic. That looks like a major scale if we want to do a harmonic minor scale, but we have to actually change one of the wides. So this wide is going to go up to here. So you actually change where some of the notes are to get some of these more odd scales. But all the scales that you're going to see in real common use in pop music, blues, country rock, jazz, funk, anything that's kind of radio friendly, you're going to see mostly major and minor pentatonic scales. The added blues note, you'll see the Mixolydian, the Dorian fingerings. You see the major scale fingerings. For ballads, you see a lot of major scale stuff. When you're playing sweet sounding or folksy sounding things, you'll play major scales on the root note. And the holy grail of all of this, right now we're just talking about playing scales in a key. The holy grail of all of this is to be able to play each of these scales for a different chord. So when I'm playing A, I'll play an A Mixolydian. When I'm playing a D, I'll play a D Mixolydian. That way I get a different sound for that. When I play an E Mixolydian. Back to A Mixolydian. So ideally, when you're playing minor, you might play, for example, in that B minor going to E, you might play a B minor Dorian. And then for the E, you might do like that was a little harmonic minor thing. So you can change scales for every chord that you get to. If you're playing even a nice little diatonic, every single one of those chords can use a different scale. So here's a C. For this, here's a G. Now for the A minor, here's an A minor pentatonic. Aeolian, and then for E minor, and then that was an E minor pentatonic with some added notes, Phrygian, and then F, maybe a major, F, back to C, C major, and then D minor. That was a D minor pentatonic, and for G, G Mixolydian. So you can follow each chord and you'll get something that has a lot more melodic direction and feel that follows the chords a lot more closely if you're actually playing scales for each of the chords. So there are two ways of using these things. You can play a scale, like a minor pentatonic for a minor chord progression, or a Dorian scale for a minor chord progression, or a Mixolydian scale for like a blues progression, or a blues scale for a blues progression. You can do that for the entire chord progression, or you can follow each chord with a scale that goes with that individual chord. It takes a lot more familiarity with the scales to be able to follow each chord, but it also gives you a sound that it tends to be a little more melodic because you're able to pick out the notes by using the right scale with the right chord. And the one page that's linked below shows how all of these rules fit together. It's a single page, shows you where the root notes are, shows you how the fingerings work in the two rotating wides, shows you how the shifts work, and it gives all the rules for what scales to play over each chord progression and what scales you can play over each individual chord. So there's a lifetime of work in there. The other videos, this was a very dry video just about how to find the notes. The other videos in this series show you what to do with the notes, and we start with all the core pentatonic stuff. So everything you've ever learned to play in pentatonics is all still just as valid as it ever was. You can do these things straight. All we're really doing is playing pentatonic scales and adding some notes when you get to the other scales. And what this does, it helps you play the scales a lot more quickly. It helps you find the scales in every position on the fretboard. Once you get used to doing this little rotating pattern, you can go anywhere. If you want to play a minor pentatonic in E flat, you play an E flat anywhere. You just play your rotating pattern there. If you want to play it here, here's my ring finger. That's an E flat minor. If I want to play E flat major, I put my pinky on it. Or here, I put my ring finger on it. And so you can really quickly find all the notes in any scale, in any position on the guitar, which of course is what makes it really possible to play over every individual chord when you're moving, through chords really quickly. So this thing will scale from the simplest beginning steps in playing pentatonics all the way up to the most complex approaches to playing over individual chords. And all of the learning process, all the learning curve is very flat because everything you learn in every pentatonic position you can play in the simplest ways by just playing in a pentatonic scale, and you can apply it in the exact same way when you're playing over individual chords or doing anything that's more complex. So the learning process with the rotating scales is a much more consistent and flat learning curve, and everything makes sense. You learn where the melodies are, you learn how to play in any position on the neck, you learn how to hear things in the same way because 2 wides and 3 narrows always sound the same, and anything you do in two wides and 3 narrows sound the same. You learn how to find the notes more quickly because you don't have to think, okay, here's my first position, here's my second position, here's my third position, here's my fourth position, here's my fifth position. Okay, now I can play up here because I found where the position is. You just find the root note and you start playing there using the appropriate wider narrow patterns. And it helps you learn them more and make more sense too because you're always seeing the same repetitive wides and narrows, wides and narrows, wides and narrows. And all the scales make much more sense too because you're just seeing them as added notes in those wides and narrows and wides and narrows. There are a ton of reasons why the rotating patterns make learning go a lot faster. So get started just with the basics. The easiest way to practice this stuff is to grab a YouTube backing track, type in guitar backing track, and type in Mixolydian, start playing your Mixolydian scales, or just type in guitar backing track minor. You can also type in a key, type in A minor pentatonic backing track, and you'll come up with several thousand backing tracks in every style. You can type in a style if you feel like playing blues. Type in backing track blues A minor pentatonic, or backing track blues Mixolydian, or you'll see that there are every variation of style and key and mode, scale type that you could possibly want to practice. And it's a great way just to get used to playing and hear the sounds of the scales over those backing tracks. And you can fiddle, and then we can work on playing all the licks. So the rest of your life, once you get these notes, what you're trying to do is get better at playing all the technical patterns, all the possible motives, all the possible licks, and connecting and varying all those possible licks in every possible way. And that's what all the other videos cover. So that should be enough to get you started with how to play all the scales. If you have any questions, post a comment.